Media fact checker. Tropical Cyclone Narelle's rare landfall and blood-red sky phenomenon in Western Australia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Cyclone Narelle made landfall in Western Australia on Friday, the 27th of March, 2013, near Exmouth, about 900 kilometers north of Perth. The sky turned blood-red in Shark Bay, Denham, ahead of Cyclone Narelle due to iron-rich dust stirred by strong winds from the Pilbara region. The red dirt is caused by iron oxide in the landscape, a common feature of northern WA's soil. Cyclone Narelle was the first storm in over 20 years to make landfall in 3 of Australia's states' territories. The phenomenon lasted several hours, beginning around midday and clearing as winds picked up and rain arrived. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian, Article 1, does not mention the exact time, 3:30 p.m, or duration, half hour, of the red sky phenomenon, while ABC provides precise timing and duration. The Guardian, Article 3, attributes the expert quote to Jessica Lingard, but Article 1 and ABC cite Angus Hines as the Bureau of Meteorology senior forecaster. ABC reports the red sky lasted until the wind picked up and rain arrived, while The Guardian, Article 1, does not specify this sequence of events. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Angus Taylor's car theft and coalition's fuel excise demands amid fuel crisis. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Angus Taylor's car was stolen on March 27 from an address in Canberra's inner south. The stolen vehicle was located later that day in Turner, a North Canberra suburb. ACT policing confirmed the theft and took the car for forensic examination. The incident occurred just before Taylor was set to attend a coalition press conference at a petrol station. Taylor, Matt Canavan, and Bridget McKenzie held a press conference calling for the Albanese government to halve the fuel excise. But not all outlets told the same story. SMH states Taylor's car was empty and running into the red, while Newscomau does not mention fuel levels or the car's condition. SMH implies the theft was reported just hours before the press conference, but Newscomau states the theft occurred the morning of the press conference. SMH includes details about Gina Reinhardt's pack appearance and attire, which are not referenced in Newscomau. This story was covered by news.com.au and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Lachlan Kennedy's back-to-back 200m victory over Gout Gout at Maurie Plant Meet. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Lachlan Kennedy won the 200-metre at the Maurie Plant Meet in Melbourne's Lakeside Stadium on 20.38 seconds, beating Gout Gout, who clocked 20.43 seconds. The race took place under heavy rain conditions, with the track becoming wet just before the start. Kennedy also won the 100-metre earlier in the evening with a time of 10.03 seconds, setting a meet record. Gout Gout praised Kennedy after the race but stated, "I'll be back for sure for the upcoming Australian Athletics Championships in Sydney." Cameron Myers set a new Australian all-comers record in the 1500m with a time of 3 minutes and 30.42 seconds. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC and Guardian mention Kennedy's back injury prevented him from the 2025 World Championships, but SMH and The Age do not explicitly state this. ABC describes Kennedy's 100m time as meet record, while SMH and Guardian do not specify this exact phrasing. The Guardian compares Kennedy and Gout to Sylvester Stallone films and Apollo Creed, a comparison not made in other sources. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Former AFL player Nick Stevens convicted of fraud in pool installation scheme. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nick Stevens, 46, was found guilty of 12 counts of obtaining a financial advantage by deception and 1 charge of using a false document in the County Court of Victoria on Monday, April 2024. Stevens was acquitted on one charge of obtaining a financial advantage by deception relating to the first victim's part payment in 2017. The fraud involved 6 customers in Mildura, Victoria, who paid Stevens a total of approximately $171,000 for pool installations that were never legally completed or delivered. Stevens worked as a distributor for leisure pools and operated a pool installation business in 2017, despite lacking proper building permits for the projects. Judge Fiona Todd remanded Stevens into custody, rejecting his barrister Jim Stavris' request to extend bail ahead of a pre-sentence hearing on May 21, 2024. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states Stevens' age as 46, while ABC reports his age as 45. News Kamau describes Stevens as a former Carlton vice-captain with 231 AFL games, but ABC does not emphasize his vice-captain role. News Kamau claims Stevens' ex-partner may have sent the false document screenshot, while ABC does not mention this possibility. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian political polling shows Labor's declining support amid fuel crisis and Iran war backlash. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese's Labour government primary vote dropped to 31% in the latest news poll, from 36% in November 2023 and 34.6% at the May election. One Nation's primary vote is at 26% in news poll and 29% in Redbridge poll. Both sources report recent figures. The Coalition's primary vote is at a record low of 17% in Redbridge and 21% in news poll. 72% of voters disapprove of US military action against Iran, with only 23% approving, reported in both polls. Anthony Albanese's net approval rating is at -17, down 18 points since December 2023, in news poll. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 reports One Nation's primary vote dropped to 26% in news poll, while Article 2 does not mention this specific news poll figure for One Nation. Article 1 states One Nation's primary vote dropped 1 point to 26% in news poll, but Article 2 does not reference this exact change. Article 1 reports Labour's primary vote at 31% in both news poll and Redbridge, while Article 2 only references news poll's 31% figure. This story was covered by news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Iraq qualifies for 2026 World Cup after defeating Bolivia in a playoff. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Iraq defeated Bolivia 2-1 in an intercontinental playoff on June 12, 2025 to secure their first World Cup appearance since 1986. The match took place in Monterrey, Mexico, with goals scored by Ali Al-Hamadi, 9th minute, and Ayman Hussein, 82nd minute. Iraq's last World Cup appearance was in 1986, where they lost all 3 group games by a single goal. Graham Arnold was the Australian coach leading Iraq to qualification, having previously guided Australia to the 2022 World Cup knockout stage. Iraq will play in Group I at the 2026 World Cup alongside France, Senegal, and Norway. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states Hussein's brother disappeared in 2014, while Article 2 does not mention the brother's disappearance timeline. Article 1 claims Iraq lost automatic qualification to Jordan in a 16 group with 10 fixtures, but Article 2 does not detail this. Article 1 mentions Iraq's 1986 World Cup was overshadowed by Uday Hussein's reign of terror, while Article 2 does not reference this. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Fungal outbreak at Sydney Hospital linked to construction-related mould exposure. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 6 transplant patients at Royal Prince Alfred Hospital were diagnosed with aspergillosis mould infection in November and December 2025. 2 patients died directly from the fungal infection, and a third infected patient died later from multi-organ failure due to sepsis associated with a skin condition. A hospital balcony near construction works was identified as the probable source of the fungal outbreak by NSW Health's investigation. Construction was taking place on the hospital's $900 million redevelopment adjacent to the balcony during the outbreak. The NSW Health report found the balcony posed the greatest exposure risk for the fungal outbreak in late 2025. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states the third infected patient died from multi-organ failure due to sepsis associated with a skin condition, while Newscomau does not specify the cause of death for the third patient. ABC mentions the patient in intensive care had a liver transplant with 150 days prior hospital stay, but Newscomau does not provide this detail. ABC specifies the patient was diagnosed with disseminated aspergillosis weeks after the organ transplant, but Newscomau does not mention this specific diagnosis. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Queensland Rail industrial action disrupting train services in April 2024. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. No trains operated between Darra and Rosewood, Ipswich Line, and Central and Cleveland on Wednesday, April 1st, due to industrial action. Queensland Rail cancelled about 300 services on Wednesday, April 1st, on the Ipswich and Cleveland lines. Industrial action began at 12 a.m. on April 1st, 2024, involving train control members, rail, tram and bus union. Negotiations between Queensland Rail and unions, including RTBU and ETU, began in January 2024 for enterprise agreements covering 600 employees. Planned track closures for critical works, including Cross River Rail, will occur from April 3 to April 26, 2024, affecting multiple corridors. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Queensland Rail denied telling workers not to attend work, but Newscomau implies workers were locked out after refusing partial duties. ABC reports Queensland Rail advised members they would not be paid if not performing full duties, while Newscomau does not mention this detail. ABC says ETU industrial action on Thursday would not repair unplanned faults unless safety risk, but Newscomau does not mention ETU's role beyond the initial strike. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. 20-year-old man charged with terrorism offences in WA after alleged extremist plot. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Jason Joseph Michaels, 20, was charged with terrorism and weapons offences following a raid at his parents' Bindoon home, 75 kilometres northeast of Perth, on February 2024. Police seized a written manifesto containing plans for attacks on Parliament House, police headquarters, and mosques in Perth during the raid. Authorities allege Michaels was radicalised online and motivated by white supremacist ideology, with evidence including online chat groups and extremist material. Michaels allegedly wrote in his diary, "What I want to do to both of these groups pales in comparison to today," referencing Bondi Beach shootings. Michaels was remanded in custody after a bail hearing in Perth Magistrates Court on March 2024, with Magistrate Belinda Coleman refusing bail. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC mentions Michaels allegedly sought employment to access bomb-making materials but left empty-handed after one day, while News Corp Australia does not mention this detail. The Guardian describes Michaels' diary as containing derogatory references to various ethnic groups, a detail not explicitly mentioned in ABC or News Corp Australia. News Corp Australia states Michaels allegedly practiced picking locks in his bedroom, but ABC does not mention this specific detail. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Affordable flight options to Europe in 2026 amid Middle East instability. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A business-class return flight from Melbourne to London with Etihad in mid-April to early May costs $4,881, nearly $2,000 cheaper than Emirates Premium Economy for the same route and dates. Economy class flights to Europe via Asia-based carriers, e.g., Air China, Malaysia Airlines, Qantas, Turkish Airlines, are priced comparably to 2025, with examples like Melbourne-London from $1,295, Air China, or Sydney-Paris from $2,167, Malaysia Airlines. Return business class fares with Qantas, Singapore Airlines, Japan Airlines, ANA, or Turkish Airlines start at $12,000 for any departure in the next 6 months. China-based carriers and Vietnam Airlines offer sub-$10,000 return business class fares to Europe. Flights via the US, e.g., American Airlines, United, are safer but more expensive, with return economy fares starting at $2,600 in May and business class at $12,664 plus. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government announces gambling advertising reforms amid public pressure and criticism. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese announced gambling advertising reforms on the 25th of April, 2024 during a National Press Club address in Canberra. The reforms cap TV gambling ads to a maximum of 3 per hour between 6 a.m. and 8:30 p.m. All gambling ads will be banned during school pickup and drop-off times on radio broadcasts. Gambling ads will be banned on online platforms unless users are verified as over 18 and can opt out. The Albanese government will block illegal offshore gaming sites and ban online keno byproducts, pocket pokies. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC report the Murphy Report was handed down in June 2023, but Newscomau states it was handed down in 2023 without specifying the month. The Guardian and ABC described the reforms as falling short of the Murphy Report's recommendations, while Newscomau frames them as the most significant reform on gambling that has ever been implemented. The Guardian reports the Rowland model proposed a cap of 2 ads per hour until 10 p.m, but Newscomau and ABC only mention a cap of 3 ads per hour until 8:30 p.m. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Fuel crisis impacts Australian tourism and travel plans during Easter 2025. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Rising fuel prices are causing widespread cancellations in the Australian tourism sector ahead of Easter 2025, with Queensland, $379 million, Victoria, $1.2 billion, and NSW, $410 million, experiencing significant drops in overnight visitor spending, $2.3 billion nationally in the year to December 2025. The federal government announced a cut to the fuel excise in response to the crisis, aimed at easing costs for businesses and consumers. Fuel prices in K'gari, Fraser Island, reached $4.25 per litre, among the highest in Queensland and the country, according to RACQ. Tourism operators across southern Queensland, including Paradise Resort, Gold Coast, and Noosa Quad Bike Tours, reported booking cancellations due to fuel costs, with Noosa Quad Bike Tours seeing a 60% drop in bookings. Hannah Robinson from Drop Bear Adventures on K'gari lost $10,000 to cancellations in recent weeks, partly due to fears of fuel shortages and flight disruptions. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states K'gari's fuel prices reached $4.25 per litre, while Article 2 does not mention this specific price point or confirm it. Article 1 reports that Gold Coast Airport expects record-breaking visitor numbers over Easter despite the crisis, but Article 2 does not mention this detail. Article 1 notes that ferry bookings to North Stradbroke Island stayed high, but Article 2 does not reference this specific destination's performance. This story was covered by ABC News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government investigates social media platforms for under-16s access ban violations. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Australia's social media minimum age laws, banning under-16s from holding accounts, came into effect on December 10, 2023, covering Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, Threads, X, Reddit, Kik, and Twitch. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and YouTube are under investigation by Australia's eSafety Commission for potential non-compliance with the under-16 social media ban. The eSafety Commission's compliance report found that platforms allow underage users to repeatedly attempt age verification until they pass, with some systems deemed unacceptable by Anika Wells. Over 4.7 million social media accounts were deactivated, removed, or restricted in the first 2 days after the ban took effect. Meta, Facebook, Instagram, reported closing 550,000 accounts under the ban, while Snapchat and TikTok combined closed 665,000 accounts. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC both report that platforms allow repeated age verification attempts, but only The Guardian explicitly states this is due to higher error rates in facial age estimation for users near 16. The Guardian and SBS do not specify the exact number of accounts removed by TikTok or Google, while ABC and News Corp Australia only cite Meta's 550,000 closures and Snapchat TikTok's combined 665,000 closures without breaking down TikTok's individual figures. The Guardian's article includes unrelated commentary on the Iran conflict and Australian evacuations, which are not mentioned in the other sources. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Melbourne storm forward 2E Kamikamika suffers suspected stroke and hospitalisation. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 2E Kamikamika suffered a suspected stroke on Monday morning after a medical episode. Kamikamika is a 31-year-old Fijian international and Melbourne storm forward with 142 appearances since his 2017 NRL debut. He played 25 minutes in the Storm's 28-24 loss to North Queensland Cowboys on Saturday, the 20th of April, 2024. Kamikamika was discharged from Royal Melbourne Hospital to commence inpatient rehabilitation, ABC, News Kamau. The Storm are without Eli Katoa for the season due to brain surgery after head knocks while playing for Tonga in November 2023. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 says Kamikamika played in the loss to North Queensland, while Article 2 clarifies it was the North Queensland Cowboys, not North Queensland. Article 1 mentions Xavier Coates is injured, Achilles, but this detail is not repeated in Articles 2 or 3. Article 1 states Kamikamika's playing future is uncertain, while Article 2 says the Storm anticipate his return after rehabilitation, no explicit uncertainty. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Disappearance of 4-year-old Gus Lamont from South Australian Outback Station. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Gus Lamont was last seen on September 27, 2025, at Oak Park Station near Yunta, South Australia, around 5 p.m. playing on a mound of dirt. His disappearance was reported to police approximately 3 hours later by his grandmother, Josie Murray, on October 1, 2025. The 60,000-hectare Oak Park Station was searched extensively by police, volunteers, drones, and Aboriginal trackers, with no evidence found. In February 2026, police declared Gus's disappearance a major crime and ruled out theories that he wandered off or was abducted. A suspect residing at the station was identified in February 2026, though no arrests have been made. Police seized items including a car and electronic devices. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states some family members are no longer cooperating with police, while ABC notes only other members of the family, not specifying, are uncooperative. News Kamau mentions police returned to the property in May 2026 due to rainfall, but ABC does not reference this specific timing or condition for searches. ABC describes Gus as playing in the sand with a shovel, while News Kamau specifies he was playing on a mound of dirt, minor but distinct details. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. NSW Council testing a permanent 4-day workweek to cut costs and improve efficiency. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Murrumbidgee Council in rural NSW is exploring a compressed 4-day workweek, Monday through Thursday, for office, depot, and library staff, with Fridays closed. The proposal involves staff working full weekly hours, 35 or 38 hours, across 4 extended days, maintaining the same customer service hours, 35 hours, but in longer daily opening times. General Manager John Scarce is leading the initiative, stating the goal is to improve productivity and reduce costs without raising rates or reducing services. The council estimates annual productivity savings of approximately $1.1 million, primarily from reduced travel time and equipment mobilization. Essential services, water saw, animal control, emergency callouts, childcare, caravan parks, swimming pools, will continue as normal and remain operational on Fridays. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states the council is focused on improving productivity and finding more efficient ways to operate, while ABC emphasizes the council is primarily responding to community demand for increased services like weekly waste collection. News Kamau does not mention consulting with ratepayers, whereas ABC explicitly states the council is consulting with ratepayers and expects a decision soon. News Kamau does not mention the 2023 trial data from per capita or the 92% per 60.7% health impact figures cited in ABC. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's Easter weather forecast and potential cyclone threat in the Coral Sea. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A tropical low, labelled 37U, between Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands is expected to deepen and strengthen over the weekend, with a high chance of becoming a cyclone by Sunday in the northern Coral Sea. The potential cyclone could move toward the Australian coast from mid-next week, with naming rights dependent on its formation location near the PNG-Fiji boundary, potentially named Owen if formed in Australian waters. Most capital cities will experience showers, but no city is forecast to be completely dry or a total washout over Easter weekend. Sydney is expected to see showers from the start of the weekend with maximums in the low to mid-20s, and a chance of rain most days except Monday. Brisbane will have temperatures reaching into the high 20s with a chance of rain for the first 3 days of the long weekend, and wind warnings along the Queensland coast. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian says Darwin will have isolated showers, storms and temperatures in the 30s, while ABC states there is between a 50 and 70% chance of precipitation each day with the usual highs between 32°C and 34°C. The Guardian mentions no city should be a washout, while ABC states the wettest spots should be far north Queensland and Arnhem Land, where up to about 50 mm is possible. The Guardian says mostly fine weather was forecast for Melbourne from Friday to Sunday, with showers expected on Monday, while ABC says Melbourne is tipped to see a shower or two and a top of just 18°C on Friday, followed by a mostly sunny 21°C on Saturday. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian private health insurance premium hikes and cost of living impact. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Private health insurance premiums in Australia will rise by an industry average of 4.41% from April 1, 2026, marking the largest increase in nearly a decade. For-profit insurers like AIA Health Insurance, 5.98%, NIB, 5.47%, Medibank, 5.1%, and Bupa, 4.8%, are leading the increases, while not-for-profit funds such as GMHBA are raising rates by 1.98%. Gold-tier hospital cover premiums will increase by an average of 13.3%, with HCF's Hospital Optimal Gold cover rising by 25%, adding roughly $167 per year for singles and $330 per year for families. Insurers attribute the hikes to rising hospital wages, more expensive medical technology, an aging population, and increased demand for mental health and chronic disease services post-pandemic. The Reserve Bank of Australia's cash rate is at 4.1% as of March 2026, contributing to elevated mortgage repayments and broader cost of living pressures. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Romanian nationals charged for targeting elderly shoppers in Queensland shopping centres with wallet scams. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 3 Romanian nationals, 2 men aged 49 and 42, 1 woman aged 29, were arrested in 8 Mile Plains on the 28th of March, 2024 for allegedly targeting elderly victims, ages 70 to 94, at Queensland shopping centres. Victims were distracted by claims of dropped wallets while their cards were stolen for fraudulent use at ATMs or grocery payments. The scam occurred in shopping centres across Kenmore, Chermside, Strathpine, North Lakes, Buddina, Caloundra, and Laidley. Police seized approximately $20,000 from a unit complex in 8 Mile Plains during the arrests. The 49-year-old man and 29-year-old woman were charged with multiple counts of fraud, 5 and 8 respectively, stealing, 4 each, and enter with intent, 2 each, and refused bail. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. TT Line ferry price surcharge due to fuel cost increases. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. TT Line announced a 15% fuel surcharge on new Spirit of Tasmania ferry tickets effective immediately, both sources. The surcharge is not applied to existing bookings, both sources. TT Line chairman Ken Konofsky stated fuel prices increased by 80%, both sources. TT Line projects $50 million in additional costs due to fuel price hikes, both sources. The surcharge will not apply to freight customers, who already pay a fuel levy, both sources. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports the surcharge for 2 adults with a car in a porthole cabin is $107, while Newscomer reports $147 for the same cabin type with a high vehicle. ABC states the surcharge may remain at some level even after fuel prices drop to partially recoup losses, while Newscomer does not explicitly mention this. ABC highlights TT Line's insolvency declaration by Tasmania's Auditor General last year, which is not mentioned in Newscomer. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Travel expenses and affordability of Albania compared to other European destinations. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Albania is described as Europe's most affordable destination for summer travel by the author in both articles. The author visited Albania late last northern summer, 2023, when $1 equaled 55 cents and 54 Albanian lek, later updated to 60 cents and 57 lek. The author spent €325, $574, on a hire car for the week in Albania. The author spent €21, $37, on petrol for the week in Albania. The author spent €11, $19, on coffee during the week-long trip. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two articles as they are identical in content. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government underwrites fuel imports amid Middle East supply disruptions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese announced new fuel security powers on Saturday, the 24th of November, 2023, to address soaring diesel and petrol prices and shortages in Australia. The government will use public funds via Export Finance Australia to underwrite the purchase of additional shiploads of fuel, fertilizer, and other essentials to mitigate financial risk for importers. Shortages have been reported at hundreds of service stations, particularly in New South Wales and Queensland, with panic buying cited as a contributing factor. The government will introduce amendments to Australia's Export Finance and Insurance Corporation Act on Monday, the 27th of November, 2023, to grant new fuel security powers. Independent distributors supplying regional Australia are struggling to secure enough fuel from major importers, leaving some service stations dry. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian does not mention the opposition's call for a fuel excise cut, while ABC reports Angus Taylor repeatedly calling for a 53% reduction in the fuel excise tax. The Guardian emphasises the government's focus on additional supplies available on the international market, while ABC highlights the government's insistence that shortages are caused by panic buying rather than supply constraints. ABC quotes Tony Wood, Grattan Institute, as saying the cost to taxpayers is unknown, but The Guardian does not include this specific financial uncertainty detail. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US President Trump's criticism of NATO allies over Iran conflict and Australia's response under Albanese. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump threatened to never forget which NATO allies helped in the Strait of Hormuz standoff. Trump ridiculed Australia for not offering military support in the Strait of Hormuz crisis. Anthony Albanese, Australia's PM, stated he would not buckle under Trump's pressure. Trump extended deadlines while deploying more military force to the Gulf region. The Strait of Hormuz is referenced as a critical choke point for global oil supply. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 says Trump's bluster and bullying are not cutting through with allies, while Article 2 claims Trump's illegal war has stretched relations with historic partners to snapping point. Article 1 describes Albanese as keeping his head down but sticking with the crowd, while Article 2 says Albanese steered well clear of even vaguely criticizing Trump. Article 1 suggests Australia should live with Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz, but Article 2 does not mention this accommodation. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Western Australia invokes emergency fuel supply powers amid regional shortages. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Western Australian Premier Roger Cook activated emergency powers under the Fuel, Energy and Power Resources Act 1972 on Wednesday, April 10, 2024, to force fuel suppliers to disclose stock levels and distribution details. 6 major fuel companies were initially contacted by Premier Cook via letter, but only 3 of the 6 voluntarily provided sensitive supply chain information. The emergency powers allow WA to compel transparency in fuel supply chains, directing stock to high-need areas like agricultural and mining regions, particularly in regional WA. Energy Minister Amberjade Sanderson stated penalties for non-compliance could reach up to $100,000 per day for corporations and $10,000 per day for individuals. The move aligns with the Commonwealth's Keep Australia Moving, Level 2, National Fuel Plan, with WA seeking to address disruptions caused by the Middle East conflict. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states Premier Cook wrote to 6 companies to request details, while ABC implies the government had previously made voluntary requests before resorting to letters. News Kamau does not mention the 1,600% overdraft case in Goldfields Esperance highlighted by ABC as evidence of stockpiling. ABC and Newscomer both cite the Fuel, Energy and Power Resources Act 1972, but Newscomer does not reference the 1972 year explicitly in its headline or body text, only ABC does. This story was covered by ABC News, news.com.au and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's government threatens gas export controls to prevent winter supply shortages. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Resources Minister Lachlan Kennedy issued a notice of intent under the Australian Domestic Gas Security Mechanism, ADGSM, on, date implied, April 2024, to gas producers, warning of potential export controls if domestic supply is insufficient for winter, July, September 2024. The ACCC forecasts a potential gas shortfall of up to 12 petajoules for July or September 2024, enough to power 76,000 homes during that period. Gas producers have 30 days, until mid-May 2024, to respond to the government's notice before export controls may be imposed. The heads of agreement ensuring domestic gas supply expired at the start of 2024, and no new agreement has been reached between the government and the gas sector. Lachlan Kennedy stated the notice is a precautionary measure and Australia's domestic gas supply is currently secure, but intervention may occur if risks emerge due to Middle East conflicts. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports the government is exploring a new tax on gas and thermal coal exports ahead of the budget, but Newscomer does not mention this tax proposal. ABC states the notice puts particular pressure on Santos due to its reliance on domestic spot gas, while Newscomer does not highlight this specific targeting of Santos beyond general producer consultation. ABC includes a direct quote from ACCC Chair Gina Cascotlib warning about higher international prices incentivizing Australian exports, but Newscomer omits this specific warning. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's Matildas squad selection for FIFA Series friendlies in Kenya ahead of 2027 World Cup. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Sam Kerr is named captain of the 22-player Matildas squad for the FIFA Series in Kenya. The Matildas will play Malawi, FIFA ranking 153, on April 11th in Nairobi, followed by either Kenya, 134, or India, 67, on April 15th. Mary Fowler, Ellie Carpenter, Kyra Cooneycross, and Katrina Gorey are notable absences from the squad. Claire Hunt will miss the tournament due to surgery on her right knee after an Asian Cup injury. The squad includes Letitia McKenna, debut, Jessica Nash, and Isabel Gomez, returning to international duty. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC mentions Fowler made it through the Asian Cup unscathed after ACL recovery, but Guardian does not reference her injury history. ABC explicitly states Claire Hunt missed due to surgery on her right knee after an Asian Cup injury, while Guardian does not mention Hunt's absence. ABC lists Emily Van Egmond and Remy Simpson in the squad, but Guardian's squad list does not include them. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Tottenham Hotspur fires interim manager Igor Tudor amid relegation crisis. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tottenham Hotspur parted ways with interim manager Igor Tudor after 7 league matches and 44 days in charge. Tudor was hired on February 14, 2024, with a contract until the end of the season. Tottenham lost 5 of Tudor's 7 league matches, including a 3-0 home defeat to Nottingham Forest on March 22, 2024. The club sits 1 point above relegation with 7 games remaining in the Premier League season. Tottenham's 50-year streak in top-flight football is at risk due to the relegation battle. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Tudor's first match was a 4-1 loss to Arsenal, while The Guardian does not mention this specific result as his first match. ABC lists Roberto De Zerbi, Eddie Hutter, Sean Dyche, Ryan Mason, and Harry Redknapp as potential successors, but The Guardian does not mention De Zerbi, Hutter, or Redknapp. ABC reports Tudor lost 5 of his 7 league matches, while The Guardian states he took 1 point from 5 league matches, implying 2 wins or draws. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Manly Sea Eagles sack Anthony Seibold after 0-3 start, Kieran Foran named interim coach. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Seibold was sacked as Manly Sea Eagles head coach on the 19th of April, 2026 after a 0-3 start to the season, including a 33-16 loss to the Sydney Roosters on the 18th of April, 2026. Kieran Foran, a premiership-winning Manly player and former assistant coach, was appointed as the club's interim head coach following Seibold's dismissal. Foran's first game as head coach will be against the Brisbane Dolphins on the 25th of April, 2026 at Redcliffe Stadium. Seibold had a 49% win rate, 37 wins, 38 losses, 2 draws, in 77 games at Manly since 2023, including a 48% win rate, 37 wins, 39 losses, in 76 games as reported by multiple sources. Manly's 2026 season began with 3 straight home losses: Sydney Roosters, 33-16, Newcastle Knights, and Canberra Raiders. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC Article 1 states Foran's first press conference included a joke about overdosing on chocolate, but SMH Article 3 does not mention this detail. SMH Article 4 claims Seibold was a dead man walking from December 2025 due to Jason King's leadership, while ABC Article 2 does not reference this timeline or internal club sentiment. ABC Article 2 lists Brad Arthur, Matt Bolin, and Michael Ennis as frontrunners for the permanent role, but SMH Article 3 only mentions Arthur and Bolin explicitly. This story was covered by ABC News and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Tiger Woods arrested for DUI after Florida rollover crash involving opioids and prescription meds. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tiger Woods was arrested on the 19th of April, 2024 in Martin County, Florida, for DUI after a rollover crash near Jupiter Island. Woods' Land Rover clipped a truck and rolled onto its side, causing approximately $5,000 to $7,254 in property damage, ABC, $5,000, Guardian, $5,000, SBS AP, $7,254. Deputies found 2 hydrocodone pills, Norco-Vicodin, in Woods' pocket during the arrest. Woods admitted to taking a few prescription medications earlier in the day, including hydrocodone and Vicodin, but denied drinking alcohol. Woods submitted to a breath test showing no alcohol but refused a urine test for drug screening. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Woods' arraignment was waived and a jury trial demanded on the 22nd of April, but ABC only states the 23rd of April arraignment without mentioning the plea or trial demand. The Guardian and ABC both cite $5,000 in damage, while SBS AP reports $7,254 in damage to the truck. No source clarifies which value is accurate. The Guardian states Woods was arrested at 3:12 p.m., but no other source confirms this exact time. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Saudi Arabia's push for US to escalate military campaign against Iran amid regional war. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, urged Donald Trump not to cut short the US-Israeli war on Iran, calling it a historic opportunity to remake the Middle East. Both articles, Guardian. Saudi Arabia has not yet joined the war directly despite weighing military involvement. Both articles, Guardian. Trump confirmed MBS's role in urging the US to continue the war, stating, "Yeah, he's a warrior. He's fighting with us." Both articles, Guardian. Iran launched a drone attack on Saudi Arabia's Yanbu oil refinery on the Red Sea coast. Both articles, Guardian. Saudi Arabia and Iran have long been regional rivals, with Saudi Arabia claiming Sunni leadership and Iran Shia leadership. Both articles, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 does not mention Saudi Arabia's 2023 detente with Iran, while Article 2 explicitly states Saudi Arabia hugged Iran close after US failure in 2019. Article 1 omits the UAE's public call for Iran's conclusive military defeat, Wall Street Journal quote in Article 2. Article 1 does not reference Saudi Arabia's potential defensive coalition support or retaliation against Houthi strikes, which Article 2 attributes to Saudi analysts. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. NRL legend Nathan Merritt's cancer diagnosis and South Sydney's Legacy Bell appearance. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nathan Merritt has stage 4 cancer affecting his liver and esophagus. Merritt has been given approximately 12 months to live by doctors. Merritt will ring the Legacy Bell for South Sydney against the Bulldogs on Good Friday at Accor Stadium. Merritt last played for South Sydney in the 2022 NRL season and has not attended a game since the Indigenous round at Homebush in 2023. Campbell Graham returns from a shoulder injury to play for South Sydney on Good Friday. But not all outlets told the same story. Newscomer reports Merritt scored 146 tries for the Rabbitohs, while SMH states he scored 154 career tries, 135 for Souths. Newscomer does not mention Merritt's dying wish for Souths to win the premiership, which SMH explicitly reports. SMH states Merritt attended his first NRL game in over 2 years on Good Friday, while Newscomer frames it as his first return since his cancer diagnosis without specifying the time frame. This story was covered by news.com.au and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Israeli death penalty law for Palestinians sparks UN and international condemnation. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Israeli Knesset passed a law on March 11, 2024, allowing the death penalty for Palestinians convicted of deadly terror attacks in the occupied West Bank, with military courts empowered to impose sentences without prosecutor requests or unanimity. The law would apply only to Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territory, not Jewish extremists accused of similar crimes, creating a discriminatory two-tiered justice system. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk stated the law is patently inconsistent with Israel's international law obligations and that its discriminatory application in the occupied Palestinian territory would constitute a war crime. The legislation mandates executions within 90 days of sentencing, with detainees held in separate facilities with restricted visits and video-only legal consultations. Israel has only applied the death penalty twice in its history, in 1948, against a military captain for treason, and in 1962, Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the bill was passed on Monday, March 11, and the Security Committee made amendments before its first vote last week, while ABC does not specify the exact date of the first vote but only mentions it was passed late on Monday, local time. The Guardian reports the law would allow courts to impose the death penalty without a prosecutor's request or unanimity, but ABC does not explicitly mention the lack of unanimity requirement, only the default sentence for Palestinians. The Guardian cites Oxfam's claim that Israel holds over 9,000 Palestinians in jails under unlawful conditions, while ABC does not provide this specific number or detail about detention conditions. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. South Australia wins consecutive Sheffield Shield cricket titles by defeating Victoria in the final. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. South Australia won the Sheffield Shield final against Victoria at Melbourne's Junction Oval. The match concluded on day 5 with South Australia winning by 56 runs. Victoria needed 196 runs to win but were all out for 139 on day 5. Alex Carey scored a century, 103, for South Australia on day 4. Scott Boland took 2 wickets in consecutive balls on day 4, Liam Scott and Ben Menenti. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1, ABC, states South Australia was at 7 to 122 after Boland's double strike on day 4, but Article 3, Guardian, does not mention this specific scoreboard detail. Article 1, ABC, does not mention the final score or day 5 details, while Articles 2 and 3 provide comprehensive day 5 results. Article 2, ABC, does not mention the controversy over Oliver Peake's dismissal or the no-ball suggestion, which is only in Article 3, Guardian. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US allows Russian oil tanker to deliver fuel to Cuba amid US blockade. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Russian oil tanker Anatoly Kolodkin is carrying approximately 650,000 to 730,000 barrels of oil, 650,000 per Guardian, 730,000 per ABC, and is en route to Cuba's Matanzas port. The vessel is sanctioned by the US, EU, and UK due to the war in Ukraine. Cuba has faced a US oil blockade, leading to severe shortages of gasoline and electricity, with blackouts and rationing reported since at least 3 months, Guardian, or years, ABC. The oil shipment could supply Cuba's daily diesel demand for 9 to 10 days, producing about 180,000 barrels of diesel, ABC. US President Donald Trump stated he has no problem with the Russian tanker delivering oil to Cuba, emphasizing humanitarian concerns over geopolitical implications. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports the tanker carries 730,000 barrels of oil, while The Guardian cites 650,000 barrels based on marine traffic and LSEG tracking. ABC states the oil is enough for 9 to 10 days of diesel supply, 180,000 barrels day, but The Guardian does not specify the daily diesel demand figure. ABC claims the blockade has crippled hospitals and public transport for years, while The Guardian focuses on a 3-month oil import gap without mentioning long-term systemic failures. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. AFL umpire error controversy in Geelong vs Adelaide match where ARC failed to overturn a free kick. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The AFL admitted Geelong was incorrectly awarded a last disposal free kick in the 4th quarter of the match against Adelaide on the 11th of April, 2024 at Cardinia Park. Tom Atkins, Geelong, kicked the ball out of bounds in a contest with Zach Taylor, Adelaide, on the wing, but umpires awarded the free kick to Geelong. The AFL Review Centre, ARC, did not have time to intervene before the ball came back into play, meaning the decision could not be overturned. Geelong won the match by 8 points, 9.14, 68, to 9.6, 60, after the contentious free kick led to a goal by Jack Martin. This is the 5th time in 4 seasons the AFL has admitted a late umpiring mistake went against Adelaide in close losses. But not all outlets told the same story. The ABC reports the AFL explicitly confirmed the ARC would have overturned the decision, while The Age does not provide this direct AFL confirmation. The Age includes a quote from David King calling Atkins' behaviour stooging, which is not mentioned in the ABC article. The ABC does not mention the historical context of Geelong's 23-year unbeaten record at home against Adelaide, which The Age highlights. This story was covered by ABC News and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. UK nurse Lucy Letby's 2015-16 neonatal unit murder convictions and allegations of miscarriage of justice. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Lucy Letby was convicted in 2022 of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 7 more while working at the Countess of Chester Hospital's neonatal unit between 2015 and 2016. She was sentenced to 15 whole-life prison orders, and the Court of Appeal refused her permission to appeal in 2023. Letby's lawyer Mark MacDonald submitted an application to the Criminal Cases Review Commission, CCRC, in 2024, supported by reports from 27 medical experts, requesting a re-examination of her case. The CCRC is currently reviewing the application for a potential retrial. Former police detective Stuart Clifton, who led the Beverly Elite investigation, and Steve Watts, author of National Police Guidelines on Healthcare Deaths, initially believed Letby was guilty but later concluded the case was a miscarriage of justice. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states David Davis called Letby's case a miscarriage of justice and criticized Cheshire Police's investigation, while Article 2 quotes Cheshire Police dismissing Davis's claims as misinformation and baseless. Article 1 reports Davis arguing Cheshire Police failed to follow official guidelines and best practice, but Article 2 omits this specific criticism and instead frames Davis's comments as part of a broader core group spreading misinformation. Article 1 includes Davis's direct quote about the investigation being initiated by a single meeting with consultants who had themselves been involved in seriously inadequate care, while Article 2 does not reference this specific detail. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Western Australia faces severe mouse plague threatening agriculture and homes. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. CSIRO Research Officer Steve Henry reported mouse numbers exceeding 2,000 to 800 per hectare in WA cropping zones, Midwest, Wheatbelt, Goldfields Esperance, as of 2024, with 4,000 burrows per hectare documented in some areas. Farmers in Western Australia are facing a mouse plague impacting cereal crops, wheat, barley, canola, worth over $1 billion, with urgent baiting required before sowing to prevent seed consumption. Steve Henry warned mice are breeding rapidly. Females produce 6 to 10 offspring every 19 to 21 days, starting at 6 weeks old, leading to exponential population growth, e.g., 100 females hectare could become 600 in 3 weeks. Residents in regional WA communities, e.g., Marawa, Ravensthorpe, reported unprecedented mouse infestations in homes, including damage to food containers and pantries. Farmers lack access to high-strength mouse bait, ZP50, without federal approval, compounding challenges from fuel crises, fertilizer shortages, and low grain prices. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states farmers are seeing up to 8,000 mice per hectare in some paddocks, while ABC only reports concerns at 200 to 300 mice hectare as cause for concern without citing 8,000. News Kamau attributes the plague's severity to cyclonic rains and warm temperatures, but ABC does not mention weather as a direct exacerbating factor. News Kamau highlights Belinda Eastuffer's specific claim of catching 40 mice day indoors during past plagues, which ABC does not reference. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Victorian government expands device ban in schools to include smartwatches, headphones, and all school types. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Victorian public and private, including Catholic, schools will ban internet-enabled smartwatches and wireless headphones from Term 1 2027. Mobile phones have been banned in Victorian public schools since 2020, with the policy expanded to all schools starting January 27, 2027. Smartwatches with notifications, internet connection, or recording functions will be restricted during school hours. Education Minister Ben Carroll stated the phone ban led to increased student focus, improved socialization, and fewer device-related incidents. Independent review found students were more focused in class and more social during breaks after the phone ban. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC notes mixed parental views on the ban's effectiveness, while Thij and News Kamau do not mention parental opposition or mixed views. Thij reports a 20% increase in students believing rules enforced fairly post-ban, but this specific statistic is not mentioned in ABC or Newscomau. ABC states 60% of children aged 7 to 12 use smartwatches, but this percentage is not referenced in Thij or Newscomau. This story was covered by ABC News, news.com.au, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Legal dispute between Kyle Sandilands, Jackie Henderson, and ARN Media over contract terminations. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Kyle Sandilands was terminated from his $100 million contract with ARN Media's Keys 1065 Sydney radio station in March 2024 after an on-air dispute with co-host Jackie Henderson on February 20, 2024. Sandilands and Henderson had a 25-year partnership on the Kyle and Jackie O Show, with their contracts collectively worth $200 million, Sandilands' $100 million, Henderson's $82.25 million claim. ARN Media gave Sandilands a 2-week deadline to remedy alleged serious misconduct against Henderson, which expired on February 28, 2024, triggering termination. Sandilands' base salary under the contract was $7.4 million annually, plus a $200,000 consultancy fee, $120,000 flight allowance, and $500,000 in contra airtime value. Jackie Henderson filed a Fair Work claim for at least $82,250,000, alleging her termination was adverse action for exercising workplace rights, psychosocial health safety complaints about Sandilands. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC report Sandilands' contract termination was due to a serious breach of contract for misconduct, but Sandilands' lawyer argues the incident was congruent with the show's style and not misconduct. The Guardian states ARN Media's statement to the ASX mentioned Henderson's complaint letter to CBC, while ABC and SMH do not reference this specific letter by name or detail. ABC and SMH report Sandilands said he had not spoken to Henderson since the incident, but The Guardian does not address this directly or provide Henderson's perspective. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Liberal Party leadership clash over gas taxes and Iran war stance. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Andrew Hastie is a Liberal MP from the Canning electorate and former leadership contender who lost to Angus Taylor in February 2024. Angus Taylor is the current Liberal opposition leader and an Oxford-educated free market advocate. Taylor dismissed the idea of increasing taxes on gas exports, stating if you whack a tax on something, you get less of it, and if we want more of something, let's not tax it more. Hastie was open to increasing the petroleum resource rent tax to 25%, a proposal the Greens claim could raise $17 billion per year. Taylor refused to directly endorse or criticize Donald Trump's war with Iran, instead focusing on reopening the Strait of Hormuz. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Taylor did not repeat Hastie's criticism of Trump's war, while News Corp Australia does not mention this omission. The Guardian states Taylor refused to say whether or not he endorsed the US and Israel's war with Iran, but News Corp Australia does not include this phrasing. The Guardian quotes Taylor as saying if you whack a tax on something, you get less of it in Canberra, while News Corp Australia does not attribute this exact quote to a specific location. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Global Conservative push to increase birth rates amid declining fertility and political debates on immigration. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Matt Canavan, newly elected Nationals leader in Australia, publicly called for a hyper-Australia with more Australian babies in early 2024. Australia's fertility rate dropped to a record low of 1.48 babies per woman in 2024, below the replacement rate of 2.1. Donald Trump has been described as a self-proclaimed fertility president and has proposed increasing IVF support while restricting immigration and abortion rights. Nigel Farage's Reform UK party aims to abolish the two-child limit on social benefits, excluding migrant families from the policy. Hungary's fertility rate was 1.39 babies per female in 2024 despite offering free IVF and tax incentives for multiple children. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 mentions Canavan's Hyper-Australia vision without elaborating on its context, while Article 2 provides detailed historical comparisons to Peter Costello's 2004 baby bonus and John Howard's 2000s income-splitting proposal. Article 1 does not mention the Children Born Alive Bill or Canavan's abortion-related clashes with Peter Dutton, which Article 2 details. Article 1 does not reference Viktor Orban's 2020 Demography Summit quote about European population replacement, included in Article 2. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian PM Albanese's housing tax reforms and energy crisis response amid Iran war tensions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese plans to wind back the capital gains tax discount and negative gearing to address housing affordability. Labour aims to build 1.2 million homes but is on track to miss this target. Albanese's government is rebuilding Australia's fuel stocks, which are below global standards, over 90% depleted. Albanese adopted the coalition's policy to cut the fuel excise in response to rising fuel prices. Opposition leader Angus Taylor criticised Albanese's televised address, calling it lacking in answers and leadership. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Ex-tropical cyclone Narelle disrupts WA gas LNG production amid global energy shortages. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Cyclone Narelle caused outages at Chevron's Gorgon and Wheatstone LNG plants in Western Australia's Pilbara region, with Wheatstone going offline around midday Thursday and Gorgon experiencing a partial outage around 3 p.m. Thursday. Chevron evacuated offshore workers from Wheatstone, 225 kilometers offshore, and Barrow Island, 50 kilometers offshore, facilities by Tuesday and Thursday respectively, operating remotely after evacuations. Santos LNG plant on Varanus Island, 75 kilometers offshore, was knocked offline by Cyclone Narelle, with winds reaching 180 kilometers per hour early Thursday evening. Woodside's Karratha gas plant suffered a production interruption, contributing to the shutdown of nearly two-thirds of WA's domestic gas supply over the past 3 months, per Australian energy market operator. WA Energy Minister Amberjade Sanderson stated that LNG operators are well prepared for cyclones and there is no disruption to domestic gas supply, with no reports of damage to date. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau states Santos Darwin LNG plant was already offline for upgrades before the cyclone, while ABC does not mention this pre-existing outage. ABC reports Cyclone Narelle intensified to Category 4 strength on Thursday, but News Kamau does not specify the cyclone's peak intensity. News Kamau claims no reports of damage to date, while ABC highlights significant wind gusts, 159 to 180 km per hour, on offshore islands, implying potential structural impacts. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.